Hello guys, it's me Simo Orahara, and in this video I want to talk about a very complex topic that overlaps with many other points, and I think that Kubo himself will find it difficult to explain, which is the issue of the chronological history of the Soul Society in the Seireitei and its relationship to how souls lived at that time. Because frankly, the biggest problem found in Bleach's story is time in general, especially about the age of the Shinigami, and this is completely another topic. And to understand what I want to reach, I will tell you the following. When I read the story of the Soul King in the novel, I learned that before the creation of the three worlds, there was one world and it was the original world. And in this world, there were humans and perhaps souls as well. The important thing is that in that world were the ancestors of the five noble families, and they were so powerful and had a certain power that they could convince the Soul King to divide the original world and create a new world. And each ancestor had a certain perspective on how the world should be. So through these ideas, this leads me to imagine that in that world there was a kind of civilization, characters with supernatural powers like the ancestors of the noble families, and there were also Ichibi and the Soul King, and I don't know of the other characters that existed in that world. This means that the original world was living a kind of civilization, as I said, so that when I wrote my fan fiction of the Soul King and his son Yuhabach in the original world, I imagined that the dwelling place of the ancestors of noble families in Rio was the same as the ancient Japanese houses of the Seireitei. And regardless of what I imagined, the information that we can deduce from the Soul King's story in the novel is that the original world had a civilization and the ancestors of noble families had a certain authority. Then, using Ryo's power, the original world was divided into three new worlds: Soul Society, Real World, and Wikomondo, as you know. And we don't have any information indicating the exact date of the Soul Society, but we have this scene where Rukia was talking about Ichigo and how he changed the Soul Society, which had been sticking to certain principles for a million years. And if we check Rukia's number, we can say that the three worlds are a million years old. And a million years ago there was the original world. So that the world of the Soul Society was the world of the dead and the souls, and there where the ancestors of noble family lived, and the real world was the world of humans, and the world of Wikomondo the world of hollows. So here is the question: did the civilization that the ancestors were living in the original world transfer it to the Soul Society after it was formed, or did all the worlds start from scratch like a primitive life? Because Kubo put this huge number a million years ago, it contradicts our human reality. I mean, the first cradle of human civilization was only, I think, 3100 BC in Mesopotamia, Iraq. And someone might say, well, the story of Bleach is mainly focused on the souls and Shinigami, not human beings. Yes, I agree with you, but even so, the souls have a direct relationship with humans. I mean, if you want to check Rukia's saying, Soul Society has been living for a million years, a kind of civilization. Was the real world also living this kind of civilization a million years ago? I mean, did humans in the beginnings of the real world have a kind of civilization? Or it was that the ancestors of noble families erased the humans' memories and their humans began their lives as a primitive life? And even if that's the case, it seems inconsistent with the fact that you have a million years. So I want to know on which basis Kubo chose this number. Or is there a Buddhist belief in which Kubo based on it that I don't know? And that's another case. That's why I don't want to focus on the issue of how humans used to live in the real world. I want to talk about the Soul Society itself, because focusing on the Soul Society, it may give us some clear ideas about this matter. Because when I saw this number a million years and that the ancestors are the ones who came up with all these things, immediately my mind went to the issue of the generation generations that took the role of the noble families, especially the Kuchiki and Shohin family. For example, Kuchiki Byakuya is the 28th head of the Kuchiki family, which means before Byakuya there was 27 leader, and there is also Yoshiro, Yorichi's brother, who is the 23rd head of the Shihon family. Here is an important question arises. As long as the ancestors of noble families were in the original world, and they were also when life began in the Soul Society a million years ago, how can there be only 28 leaders of the Kuchiki family for a million years, and the same thing for the Shohin family, if we assume that the person who represents the number one in each family represents the ancestor of the family? This specific question was asked to Kubo at Club Outside. And here Kubo answered this answer where he said that the history of the noble doesn't represent the history of the Soul Society but that of the Seireites. And based on this answer, I can say that we have the ancestors who lived in the original world and then lived for a certain period in the Soul Society, during which they cut off the Soul King and imposed certain policies and then died, and the successive generations came until one of those generations decided to establish the Seireitei as the capital of the Soul Society, so to speak. And this leads us to talk about the Seireitei exactly. From Kubo's answer, it seems that the Seireitei as we know it today was created long after the Soul Society existed. But as an idea or a patch of land, Seireitei is most likely the place where the ancestors of noble families have settled since the formation of the Soul Society. So that if you compare Seireitei with the rest of the other areas in the Soul Society, you can see that it's the only place that shows signs of luxury and urbanization, in contrast to the rest of the region of the Rokungai. I mean, as mentioned in the manga, some areas don't even have shoes to wear. So Seireitei as a place is described as the place where the Shinigami lives, but the most accurate definition is where pure souls live. And exactly the noble families, whether the 5 great noble families or the rest of the other noble families. Bearing in the mind that the main branch of the Shiba family has long lived outside the Seireitei. Briefly, to summarize to you my general idea on this subject, after I have told you all these ideas, I can say that the ancestors, after they decided to divide the original world into 3 worlds, they decided to remain in the realm of the dead, and that is the Soul Society, so that they can control several things, and the most important of which is the flow of human souls from the living world. It may be that the ancestors manipulated the human souls that were in the original world so that they erased their memory and made them in the real world start their lives from scratch, so that the first human life began as a primitive life and developed with the successive years, while the ancestors keep the civilization they had in the original world to themselves, and they built the first foundation stone of Seireitei in the form of a small city that began to evolve with time until it took its current form, which we know as Seireitei. What should be pointed out here is most of the concepts that we have about the Shinigami, like their jobs to purify the souls and even their clothes and how they are dressed, these things came with Yamamoto with the first Gotei 13, which means just in the last thousands of years. So can you see the imbalance in the timeline of the events? How can million years as the history of the Soul Society be summarized only in the last thousands of years, since the core of the story is about Shinigami and the Gotei 13. That's why I find that Kubo didn't deal well with the timeline of the story, especially with the presence of this big plot hole in timelines, so that you have a long history that is based on nobles and it's 1 million years old, but at the same time the history of the Shinigami can be reduced to less than 2000 years. So guys, what do you think about this mess? Do you have any other explanations that can fix these plot holes? Tell me in the comments, and see you guys in my next video.